Have we been lied to about how Christianity began? One conspiracy theory says that there were many different kinds of Christianity. The kind we have today triumphed by force.
The idea that there were many versions of Christianity and that Paul's version somehow triumphed by political power play, I think is quite implausible. Of course, there were different ideas about Jesus, there were opponents of Jesus, and the first Christian church, as it began to grow, had all sorts of questions, and they were working out what they thought about particular issues. And so we can see when Paul writes his letters, for example, when he writes to the church in Corinth, they've got all sorts of funny ideas about this and that, and Paul has to address those questions. But the evidence is that although there were these differing opinions, and in particular, one of the most striking questions for the very first Christians was, should Christians keep all of the Old Testament law or not? And on that issue, there were, if you like, two opinions in the first Christian church. There was the opinion of some of the Christians with a strongly Jewish background, especially in Jerusalem, who said, yes, Christians, including Gentiles who want to become Christians, should keep all the Old Testament law and the Jewish law. But Paul believed that actually with the coming of Jesus there had been a change, and that with the death of Jesus on the cross, the Old Testament law was no longer obligatory on all Christians. The ritual parts of the law, circumcision and so on, Paul spoke of Christians being free. So you had these two, if you like, competing versions of Christianity. But Paul's version, which did indeed eventually come to be accepted by the church as a whole, it was not a matter of political power play, but the evidence is that they talked it out in the early church, and that the church leadership, including the leadership in Jerusalem, people like Peter and James, the brother of Jesus, that they accepted the Pauline version, if we can put it like that, because it wasn't just the Pauline version, it was also Peter's version. They came to agreement that this was the Christian gospel. So there were some differences, though not interestingly, as far as we can tell, over questions like Jesus risen from the dead, being the Son of God, dying for our sins. It seems as though everybody agreed on that among the Christians. But the other differences, they worked out together, and I don't think there's any reason to think that there were all sorts of different views and that the church later on plumped for Paul's.
The first Christians agreed that Jesus was the Son of God, who died for our sins and rose again. That was what defined them as Christians. They did have differences, but they solved these by debate, not by force. This is another misleading claim about how Christianity began. The most important alternative Christianity was Gnosticism. Next time, we'll look at the Gnostics.